My name is Ben Hendricks, native of Stephen, Minnesota. I am currently in the Navy, got in 2000. I'm still in. Son of Brian and Jean, twin brothers, retired from the Air Force. So I'm going to talk about my time so far in the Navy, kind of my thoughts of why I wanted to go there, and kind of go through my tours as I've been to the service. So about two and a half years before I graduated in 2000 from Stephen Argyle Central, was in my parents' living room reading through some magazines.
And you graduated in what year?
2000.
2000.
2000. Reading a magazine, and on the front side of the back cover there was basically a bunch of Navy midshipmen throwing their caps into the air, and I kind of read a little bit, a snippet. I thought that was interesting, so talked to the school guidance counselor about, hey, what is this? How do I get an application? I didn't know much about, I guess, any of the academies or anything like that. So
who was the counselor at the time? Remember?
Let's see.
It's been a while ago.
I think it was Jill Adolphson, if I remember correctly.
Jill Adolphson, okay.
Yeah. So it took her a couple of days to get that information. And I guess back then the internet wasn't the internet today, so it was not an online application. It was, you filled out a piece of paper, sent it in, regular mail. So, but that was a process, going through that application and getting that through. So it was pretty interesting. Filling that out, going through the interviews of the state senators and congressmen for the district. The congressman at the time was Colin Peterson from, if I believe, I think it was District 7. And I forget who the senators at the time were, but went to, I believe, his Detroit Lakes. It was either Detroit Lakes or Thief River Falls, I forget. Down to the office to do the interview, not with him specifically, his staff members, and same thing down in the Twin Cities for the senators. So at the time it was kind of interesting, them asking me questions on why I wanted to do this. And I guess my big driver was, there was the service piece, but going to a academy, it didn't matter which one, college will be paid for. So that was a good driving factor. And I know my parents were interested in that too, not having to pay for college. The taxpayers would pay for it. So, I guess a year and a half goes by, maybe a couple years. I got, I had to go through all the test taking and all that.
So you're in the Naval Academy?
I am,
in
yes.
Indianapolis?
Yes.
Okay.
So I got a denial letter at first, just because my test scores weren't high enough, and then they gave a couple options, like you could go to this preparatory school, to that preparatory school. That wasn't that, sure I could have done that, but I took the test again, and it worked out. So I got a lot better scores. I didn't really do much more studying. I guess I just took the test better. And Colin Peterson was the one that nominated me. As long as everything else is good, you have good academics, you have a whole, a well-rounded person, and then you get the nomination, you're pretty much in from that point. So, so it was about June, July, I forget exactly when, of 2000. My parents, and I forget everyone that was there, took me to the airport, got on an airplane, and landed in Baltimore, Maryland. And there was some people there also from Minnesota that got nominated too, from different areas of the state.
Anybody you knew, or?
Nobody that I knew, no. A lot of the people were probably, from the Twin Cities area, it being more populous. But yes, I was the only person from Northwest the couple that picked us up were from Minnesota originally, and now they were in Maryland. So they sponsored our, I guess, half day prior to going to getting dropped off at Annapolis. So pretty interesting. They bought us a couple bushels of crabs, which I had never eaten in my life. So that was an interesting experience. And then just getting to know the people was pretty cool. But after that, we induction day. We went to I Day. We raised our right hand, and it was 4 years of school at the Naval Academy at that point. So I graduated May of 2004. I had a degree in mechanical engineering. The academy itself is absolutely cool.
Can we go back and
Sure.
tell us a day-to-day routine at the academy?
Yep, absolutely. The first year is probably the most difficult as far as getting into a routine. That was entirely different from being in high school. Still a lot of learning, more than I was accustomed to, but a lot of that was on the military side too. A lot of rote memorization, and then just trying to, I guess, be more self-sufficient. Contrary to that too was being part of a team. As we're going through the couple months before the rest of the brigade of midshipmen comes back for the academic year. So we had about a month and a half of, I guess if you want to call it, basic training before everyone came back. But so day to day then was, there was physical training first thing in the morning, and then just I get going through the routine of that, a lot of learning, physical training, and just kind of just learning all that stuff and be like, hey, this is what the military is about.
Did you have a lot of get down in the mud and rifle training, or?
No, not much. Not much of that. It was, learning about who was in your company. I was Mike Company, and there's people from all over the United States. Some were previously enlisted. I was not. In a couple of occasions, there were some also like foreign people too, but not very many at all that were kind of at the Naval Academy going through that experience. But early, rise early, go to bed late, and do it again. And there were no weekends. So it was 7 days a week. Sunday would be a little bit less rigorous. That was kind of our sort of day off.
Do you have a rank while you're?
I was a midshipman, so I guess the first year, which I said was the hardest, you're a plebe. So you're not looked upon very highly. Everyone in front of you, has gone through that year. And as, like I said, the rest of the brigade came back.
So how many in your class, or what you call it?
So each class starts with a little over 1,000 people, and as the 4 years go by, people decide to, hey, this isn't for me, or they can't take it. Whether that is
Kind of weed them out.
Yeah, and that's fine. But I think graduated with about 950 people, roughly around there, somewhere between 900 and 950. So the academics were it's now that I'm out of plebe summer and going through, I guess the academics. Still in my first year, it was not easy. I guess I was used to a pretty high GPA in high school, and I got my first grade card, I guess, at the end of the first semester. I was like, oh, geez, I need to do better. But I was still, it was challenging. I wouldn't say I was having too much fun at that point, which was okay. During our first year, we could not have cell phones, we could not listen to music. There was a decent amount of restrictions just to make sure doing what we needed to. We were developing in our studies, whether that was militarily or academically. So yeah, we would, as far as our treatment, we'd be the upper class would, make sure we were studying what we needed to. There's a decent amount of yelling. As we would, do the military things that we did, we'd march in formation to meals. So, and the whole brigade would get seated down to a meal at the same time. So, cooking for 4,000 people.
So what was the food like?
Food was good. It wasn't bad. It was, looking back on it, probably bought by a normal government contract. I just couldn't imagine making food for 4,000 people at the same time. But they did a great job. So yeah, it was going to classes in the morning. If I remember correctly, 4 periods, so just under an hour each. And then getting back, I guess going back to the dorm. Bancroft Hall was the name of it. And then getting lunch, and then 3 periods in the afternoon. And after that was, it depended on if you did sports or not. I didn't do any collegiate sports. I did just intramurals. So people would either do that or go to practice for their collegiate activities, and then we would eat dinner. And then it was pretty much studying at that point. Studying, homework, getting ready for the next day. So that was Monday through Friday. In our first year, we couldn't go into Annapolis. You had to, I guess, earn those privileges as you in your third year. You could start going into Annapolis during the weekday. So the weekends we had to get permission to actually leave campus.
Did your parents come and see you anytime we were there?
They did at the end of plebe summer. They came and saw me. I'm sure I looked a little different, acted probably a little differently. Sure, they got to see what I did, what I accomplished.
I'm sure they were proud of you being in.
Yeah, I think they were.
Yep.
It was a quick visit. I think it was just a couple days, and that was, like I said, that was a couple days before the rest of the brigade got back, and we started the academic year. So, so that was the end of the first year. We had 2 semesters of studies, and then during each of the summers we would do some military training. There's usually about 3 periods of training that you could choose from. Or there's 3 periods. You had to do 2, and then you could get 1 off. So I could go back home and for about 3 weeks before the start of the next academic year. So during my summers, it would be we would learn how to. Some people would learn how to sail, or I'm trying to remember where I went on that first summer. We took I think it was a motorized vessel about just over 100 feet. We were under the cognizance of a merchant marine officer. I think it was a lieutenant commander, and his assistant was an ensign. But we took that craft from Annapolis to like Newport, Rhode Island, New York City. So it wasn't sailing, but we took it up there, and sure, then we got to see New York City. We got to see Newport.
So you got to tour around while you're in those?
We did. We were in uniform, so it was. It wasn't a fleet week or anything like that, but it was still pretty neat.
You have rank now, or
no? Just
still midshipman.
The first year was a midshipman 4th class, and then you'd be a 3rd class, 2nd class, and then 1st class. So kind of in between, being a freshman and a sophomore, a 4th class and a 3rd class. And then, going on to my 2nd year there, my 3rd year, and then my senior year, more responsibilities, picking a major, and I guess the studies they got more challenging, but as now I will, into that routine. I knew what to expect. It was better. Grades improved and all that, but
So what'd you pick for your major?
mechanical engineering. So I graduated, like I said, with that. I haven't used it since. But,
So you didn't pick an easy one.
I did not, no. I figured going to a school like Annapolis, known for, or at least I knew it had a decent engineering program, so I picked one. There were, I guess, mechanically things moving like that interested me. So, so yeah. I guess a couple other things about the academy. You could have anywhere from 1 to 3 roommates. And at the end of my first year, I guess I picked a couple different roommates, and they are still great friends of mine today. So keep in touch a lot. But
Were you like in a cubicle, like in a room, or?
we were. I would say the 3 of us, the room, including all the places for storage, were probably about the size of that living room. I guess 25 feet by 25 feet, so fairly small. Trying to house 4,000 people in one dormitory, yeah, was
Were there inspections?
pretty cramped. There were inspections more in the first year, as far as whether it was uniforms or haircuts and stuff like that. But as the years progressed, I guess we weren't looked at that closely. It was more for, just to make sure, okay, you're good, on to the next person. So, me never going through actual basic training, my assumption is that the inspections that I had were not as, not as difficult. That's my guess. I don't know. I have nothing to base it on. So, overall, time at the academy, it was. We kind of have a saying: when we are there, we don't want to be there. And I'm generalizing, but after the fact, after you graduate, it was a pretty awesome experience. Annapolis is a gorgeous town on the Chesapeake Bay, a lot different than Northwest Minnesota. So I got to experience that, and I guess that kind of lifestyle a little bit.
Winters were still kind of rough, though, weren't they?
Winters were okay. It did snow. It was always interesting looking at some people going to class. Our shoes didn't have much traction, our uniforms, so, and there was definitely people that were not used to ice, so it was fun watching them slip and fall on the way to class. It was great. I enjoyed it. But yeah, we wore, black uniforms. They weren't normal Navy uniforms, just the midshipmen wore them, so we had the covers, and it was kind of black slacks and a long sleeve t-shirt. In the summer, in the spring, summer, it would be a short sleeve. So.
Did you go to any Army-Navy games?
We went to all of them. So yes, we were, the brigade was forced, if you want to say forced. We had to go to all the home football games. It was a requirement, unless some people did not have to, but those that were competing in other collegiate sports at that time, they didn't have to. But for the most part, yes, I went to every home football game. In my first year, we were successful. We won one game that was against Army. I forget where that was. It was in a bigger facility, probably Baltimore and Philadelphia, something like that. But those were pretty fun. They were a lot of fun.
It looks like, I've only seen them on TV, but they look like a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if we win. And if I recall correctly, in my time there, I think we won all 4. Those were the only one. Other than those 4 wins, we didn't win many more games my entire time there. So the team got a lot better after I left. So, so I graduated in May 28th, 2004. That's the same day I was commissioned as an ensign. I'll rewind a couple years. So in your 3rd year there, you're a second class, and you kind of are at the point, hey, do I want to continue doing this? Do I not? And if you choose not to, you have to pay your time back. But we call it a 2 for 7. You've had 2 years in, and you kind of sign the contract that you have your other 2 years at the academy and at least 5. So after that, so you've gone through 2 years, you sign on the dotted line, you sign for 7 more years. So I did that.
So after 2 years, you have to sign for 7 more?
Yeah, you're at your halfway point at the Naval Academy, and they do that to basically put that line in the sand, so people can be like, hey, choose now, because after today you're going to be in the military. We got you for at least another 7 years. You have to finish out your time at the Naval Academy. Otherwise, you owe us somewhere. But yeah, so I signed the piece of paper. At that point, I was.
You owe us. You have to pay back our education, or.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the kind of thing. Because you're getting a free education. Hey, we're gonna. If you don't give us time.
Do you know this when you sign up?
When I started. Well, I knew there was a time commitment. I didn't know when exactly that would happen.
I thought it was just 4 years, but it's 7,
yeah.
huh?
Yes, the Naval Academy is 4 years long.
But I thought your commitment after you get out, I suppose it would be another 3 years, right?
The minimum commitment is 5 after getting out of the Naval Academy. That is the minimum. It depends on which warfare you go into. Like surface warfare officers serving on ships are 5 years. Pilots are 7. So the few people that do go, like special forces and medical, they're again 7 or a little bit longer than 5, because specialized schools put more time in.
And yours was?
Mine was 7. So in my, I'm trying to remember. So we put in our preferences of where we want to go, or I guess what we want to do. We could choose from, like I mentioned, going to be a surface warfare officer on ships, a submarine officer. Not many. You could pick special forces, medical, Marines.
What'd you pick?
I was getting to that.
Sorry.
Nope. That's I wanted to stay in the Navy. I know the Marines are part of the Navy, but I was going to be in the Navy and to be a pilot. So that was my first choice. I was able to do that because I got eye surgery in 2002. Fixed my eyes, and I could fly after that. I forget how long from when you put in your preferences to when you actually were able to find out. I don't recall. But there's a ceremony. We opened the envelope. We saw what we got, and then later that day we put on our uniform, and we could now that I knew I was able to pick pilot, we could figure out after we graduated when we would go down to Pensacola, because they kind of staggered it in about 1 month apart. So I didn't pick, I think I did. No, I picked the first one. So I came back home for about a month, and then I went to Pensacola the end of June of 2004, and I started my flight training. So
kind of warm down there about that time, isn't it?
It was. I moved in with a couple buddies of mine on Perdido Key, which was just right on the Gulf of Mexico. And yeah, we at that point we were students in aviation pre-flight indoctrination. It's about a couple months. We learned about just the basics of flight. We're not flying at that point. Just weather, how do aircraft fly, just pretty easy stuff, but very, very, very competitive. You got to make sure, you're either getting 100% or, 1 or 2 wrong, and kind of how you, perform there figures out where you're going to go for your follow-on training. So the follow-on training there was you get to fly a fixed-wing aircraft. It was a T-34. So that was our primary.
Is it a trainer?
It was a trainer. It was a single engine turboprop. Flew about, I'm trying to remember, probably anywhere from 150, 160 miles an hour, somewhere around there. So yeah, I got about 50 hours there in that aircraft. That was still in Pensacola. Actually, no, apologize. That was in Corpus Christi, Texas. So after I finished with, the couple months of API, moved to Corpus Christi. There I did primary flight training. That was about, I don't know, just under a year. And then from there, again, still competitive, but you learn how to do basic maneuvers in an aircraft. You learn how to do formation maneuvers with other students.
In this trainer, or
It's in a trainer. It's a two-seat, so it's tandem. There's front and back. There's always someone with you. There's always an instructor making sure.
is this a jet now, or
No, it's a propeller.
still prop?
It's a turboprop. It's a jet engine, but just designed to, I guess, power propeller. So after that, we could pick our preferences of what we wanted to do, where we wanted to specialize. You could put jet aircraft, you could put propeller aircraft, or helicopters. Those are kind of the big ones. I had the grades to get jets, so I put them. And then I put helicopters after that, and then prop aircraft. So I didn't get jets, which I was okay with. I got helicopters. And then so the Navy trains, so I finished up primary, then I went to advanced flight.
It's the same place, or
We moved back to just north of Pensacola. So it's different airfield. It is Milton, Florida. So same rough area, but I didn't live in Pensacola. I lived in Milton. Moved in with a couple buddies. Had a place up there and learned how to fly a helicopter for the first time in my life.
how many years have you got in now?
One and a half. So yeah.
This is after the academy.
After I got commissioned. So still an ensign at this point. Yes, and so learning how to fly a helicopter, pretty neat. It's not intuitive. It's not easy. The instructors there definitely have to know what they're doing.
What kind of helicopter?
It was the Sea Ranger, the TH-57. So it is I guess a military version of a Bell 206 helicopter. It's got, I'm trying to remember. It has one engine, two blades, and it's got a tail rotor. So learning how to hover, how to do auto rotations, and then just like normal procedures and navigate, and it was cool. It was really neat. We finished up. We also flew a lot of instrument flying, using I guess TACANs and VORs, being able to fly just not looking outside, using our instruments. So we got an instrument rating out of that, which is not being able to use your eyes to navigate, just having to rely, on everything which your instruments are telling you. It's not intuitive. It's not easy to learn. But now that I've done it for a while, it's it's second nature. But it was pretty cool. So and then after that, so I finished primary, then I finished advanced, and now I could go into the gray aircraft. I could go learn how to fly in actual, in aircraft that can deploy.
Aircraft being helicopters?
Helicopters, yep.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, so there's a couple we could pick from. Back then now it's the H-60, so we could pick three. We could pick the Mine Hunters, so the H-53, the bigger 3-engine ones. Not many people got picked that just because there weren't as many squadrons. And then for the most part, you could either pick from an H-60 Bravo, which normally deployed on smaller ships, so destroyers, cruisers. Or we could pick the SH-60 Foxtrot and Hotel. So
Did it have names other than just
They did.
nomenclatures?
I'm trying to remember.
Like there were Hueys, there's Chinook, there's
Well, yeah. So the 60s.
that's Army, but
Yeah. So the 60 is it's basically a Navy version of the Black Hawk.
oh, but
Yeah.
okay, all right.
So that's what I learned to fly. I was able to.
That's a big chopper.
It was. It's twin engine, just under 4,000 horsepower. Can fly about 150, a normal about 150 miles an hour. At the max speed, about 200. The helicopter that I trained on. So I was in Milton, Florida, and now I'm learning how to fly that helicopter in San Diego. So moving out to San Diego, it was a lot of fun because I got out there. I went through SEER training, learning how to evade, resist, and kind of survive.
What kind of training? SEAL training?
SEER.
SEER training.
Yep, SEER. They put all aviators through that. So hey, if you get captured, you can at least so you've had that training under your belt. So from there, I report back to the squadron. That training was 2 weeks long. Report back, and it was May of 2006 at this time, and they told me there was a backlog of students. So they said, "Hey, we'll give you a call."
Because you've always got, during this time, you've always got Iraq and Afghanistan hanging over your head too, don't you?
Sort of. I was in the military, but it seemed like I wasn't because I was just learning how to fly. I wasn't in charge of anyone. I just had to learn and not fail. So I had about 3 months off in San Diego since there was this backlog of students. It was a summer in San Diego. It was great. I had no commitments. I didn't have to stand duty. I didn't have to study. It was a lot of fun. But eventually they did call us, so then I have to learn about the aircraft. I have to learn how to fly it. We are the experts in the aircraft. If anything goes wrong, the emergency procedures and everything. We had to learn all that: fuel, hydraulics, everything. So
when you fly, did you land on ships too, or?
At this point, it was still flight training. We had to learn how to just fly basic maneuvers in this aircraft. We would progress doing different types of landings over land, and then we would also do over water mission training. So the H6.
What would be your mission?
So we would train for search and rescue. We had 2 pilots, and then in the back we would at least have 2 enlisted aircrew.
Did you have swimmers too then, or? Yeah.
Yep, we had one was a crew chief, one was a swimmer. We would have them always in the aircraft.
So you had winches.
We did. Yep, we had a rescue hoist. They would operate that. Trying to remember, it's probably about a 600-pound capacity, but yeah, they could put 2 people on there. We would train for search and rescue. We would train for anti-submarine warfare. We had sonar buoys in the aircraft. We had a dipping sonar in the aircraft. So that was pretty cool. Learning the tactics of that, or at least the basic tactics on how to employ a dipping sonar. It was pretty neat.
You'd put something in the water and.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. So again, basic training for that. Learning how to fly.
That had to be pretty interesting.
It was. It was. There was a lot of studying about sound propagation and learning that stuff. So, my time in San Diego learning how to fly the aircraft, it was a little less than a year. And then at that point, I had just under 3 years in. So I was in 02. I was Lieutenant JG at that time. And when you finish that, you kind of get to pick, where you're going to go, or not pick. You get to put your preferences in. So, in the community that I was in was the HS community, helicopter anti-submarine. We could either pick to go on aircraft carriers, or you could pick to. Actually, no, that was it. You could pick to go on aircraft carriers. So you got to figure out, hey, the community has evolved since then.
So you didn't have much of a pick.
Yeah, you didn't have much of a pick. So at that time, you could go to Jacksonville, Florida. We could go to stay in San Diego, and
Norfolk?
nope, not Norfolk. And then there was a squadron in Japan at that time. I picked Jacksonville, or that was my preference. So I'm now at my first fleet tour. I'm still a Lieutenant JG. It was a pretty big leap though. Now I'm in an actual deployable squadron. I get there around St. Patty's Day 2007. The squadron is set to deploy in July of that year, 2007. So
Deployed to?
We are on the USS Enterprise. So, and we would, I guess I'll get to that and where we went, but it was a pretty big leap now, not being a student. I was, a naval aviator. I was an officer. Eventually I would be a division officer and kind of, all right, now I get to be an officer, in charge of people. Kind of, hey, now I'm in the Navy. Before it really wasn't. It was just...
You're training before.
I was training and having a lot of fun at the time too. But now getting into the more advanced tactics on how we employ this aircraft, working through my, warfare levels. Coming out of San Diego, I was a level 1 as far as being able to be a part of that aircraft. I was qualified to fly the aircraft. Eventually, as I went through my first tour, I would be a helicopter second pilot. So I was, I had more experience, more hours. I was more relied upon as far as weapons and tactics, as far as knowing the procedures, and then just having, being able to be relied upon. If there was an emergency, okay, someone wouldn't have to tell me what to do. I would just be able to, execute that procedure.
So are you staying on the ship now, or are you?
When we deployed, it just depended what the Enterprise was doing. But yes, I did a 5-month deployment. We were on the ship the aircraft were on the ship the whole time. We did some port visits. We did 4 on that cruise.
Ports?
4 port visits. The first one was 4 days in Cannes, France. So it was a Mediterranean port visit. At that time, never been to Europe. I don't know how it was because I was really new to the squadron. I did not have to stand duty that entire port visit, so it was great. Got to get off the ship, be in the south of France for 4 days. It was pretty.
So you got the tour around.
We did. Did not have to be in uniform or anything like that. Like I said, we stopped in Cannes. We were able to go to Nice in Monte Carlo. It was pretty cool. A lot of fun. Deployment itself, like I said, was 5 months.
So bringing you back to the Navy.
Sure.
So what were your living quarters like?
Oh, when we were on the ship, or you mean?
On the ship.
Oh, it was 8 people to our room.
How many?
8.
All officers?
They were all officers, ranging from ensign 01 to 03, lieutenant. So we were in a stateroom. We weren't in, so we got to eat in the wardrooms. I guess, we think about Navy ships, the enlisted, they had the, more people to their berthings, and then they would go eat down on the mess decks. So officers on a ship would have it a little bit better.
So what was the food like?
It was food.
I've heard Navy has pretty good food.
It was okay. It depended on how long it was between our replenishments. So we would get, after we got replenished at sea, we would have, the fresh vegetables and fruits for a while. But after a bit, we'd run out of that, and it would just be canned. But there was always staples every day. Non-perishables. I remember not drinking milk for that deployment, which was fine. I just didn't want to because it was probably the powdered stuff that was mixed up. But there was always like chicken that you could eat every day, and there was plentiful amount of, I guess, whether it was.
So the food was decent.
The food was okay. Life aboard, yeah, life aboard ship. It was yeah, still having to learn integrating into a carrier air wing. So at that time, there's about 6 squadrons that made up our air wing, and we were just part of the ship's crew. I guess I was part of the air wing, not part of the ship's crew. So we were able to, when the ship would do training at general quarters, we were pretty much exempt from that, which was nice. Just because they would do it at all times in the day, and we had to worry about crew rest and crew day, because we'd fly. We had to get at least 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep before we would fly, and so a decent amount of rolls, so we could skirt by some things, which was nice.
So were the helicopters, are they stored below then, or?
Both. Some were in the hangar, some were up top. Probably had about, so it was, we had a squadron of 8 helicopters. All of them were there. I'd say we probably had at least 3 up top, and the other 5 were either being worked on, or there just wasn't room for all the aircraft up top. And we would go, we'd mostly do, we'd do some training. Our main job, the squadron's main job, was to be airborne, because when the fixed wing were airborne, a helicopter always had to be airborne to make sure, if someone ejected or had issues, punched out into the water, we would go pick them up. So we were the first ones to take off and the last ones to land.
Okay.
So that was a 5-month deployment. That was my only deployment that I got on my first tour. Let's see.
You were out for what, 6 months, or?
We left in July and came back in December, before Christmas. So, yeah, roughly 6 months. Eventually, like I said, I was 02. I promoted to lieutenant, so I was 03 while at that squadron. I made aircraft commander, so I was able to be in charge of an aircraft, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Whether that was, hey, you're going to go execute the mission today.
So you were in charge of that chopper then,
I was in
right?
charge, yep. I didn't work on it. I haven't maintained an aircraft, but when it was airborne, it was mine. So that was cool.
How many crew?
Normally 4, 2 pilots and 2 enlisted air crew. At times we could have, depending on the configuration in the back, if we were going to go do some landings over land, we would have 3 enlisted air crew in the back. So it would just depend. If we were going
You have door gunners, or?
We did carry some weapons. We could have Hellfire missiles, 50 cal machine gun, also M240, which is 7.62. So those were, at least back then, those are the weapons that we did have. So we would train to that a lot, and whether we were on the aircraft carrier or not, when we were not deployed or doing workups with the Enterprise, we would be back in Jacksonville, still flying, and then getting more flight hours, still training, kind of getting ready for the next deployment, which I didn't have to deploy again, because once we got back, the Enterprise went into the shipyards. She was there for a while. So
while you were doing this training, did you ever have target practice where you got to shoot a Hellfire missile or 50 cals? Or?
I wouldn't. The enlisted air crew would fire the machine guns, the 50 cals and the 240s. But we did get to shoot some missiles, not many, because I guess they're
expensive.
They're expensive. Yep. In my first tour, I got to shoot 1, and that was before we deployed. So it was pretty neat.
Did you hit anything?
We hit the target.
Okay.
Yeah, we hit the target. So.
Good.
And there's video proof of it. I don't have that. I don't have that video.
I'm not doubting.
Yeah, I don't have that video now. So, so that was. So after the end of your first tour, it's your sea tour. You can go to a shore tour. You have a choice. You have preferences on what you can do next. You can go be a flight instructor. And there was a whole bunch of other things that you could do. So it definitely depended on how well you did, how many like warfare qualifications you had, how many deployments you had, flight hours, all that. I was able to get fully qualified. So at the time it was level 3 in sea combat, which we called it. So we were able to do our, I was a fully qualified junior officer. So I put my preference in to be a flight instructor, and I got it. I went back to San Diego to instruct at the squadron HS-10, which is where I learned how to fly the, I guess the 60 Foxtrot Hotel. So I went back to learn to instruct. It was pretty cool. Going back to San Diego and not having to deploy was pretty good. This was a 3-year tour. Let's see.
As an instructor?
As a flight instructor. Yeah. So we would teach students how to fly their first gray aircraft. So they were winged aviators at this point. They were naval aviators. We just had to teach them, hey, cool, you can fly a helicopter, but now let's show you how to fly a gray one. So it was a lot of fun. Again, like I said, I didn't have to deploy. I was back in sunny San Diego. Couldn't complain about that. So yeah, it was that was 3 years long, and so that was my second tour. Trying to think of some other things. I guess some of the jobs I had when I was there, I was the let's see, I was the NATOPS program manager. So yeah, I'll go through the acronym. So each squadron has basically a standardization. Or a way to standardize, hey, to make sure everyone knows their procedures. Emergency procedures, not really into tactics, but kind of, hey, can you fly the aircraft? Do you know the information? So I would be the person from the squadron that would go to the fleet squadrons and basically assess them. And they would get that assessment about every 18 months. So it was my job to assess them that, hey, they were good to go.
You're in charge again.
I was, and I was a lieutenant at the time, but they asked me if I wanted that job, and I said absolutely. So, I could go on detachment. It would be with just me and probably an E6 or an E7 aircrew, who is the assessor on the aircrew side. So it'd be a team of 2. Going to, at that time, the squadrons did move up to Norfolk, so we would go to Norfolk. We would go to also the Station Star helicopter squadrons. We'd go to Key West. We'd go to Fallon.
Oh darn, huh?
Yeah, we'd go to Fallon, Nevada. We'd go to Japan. I did not get to go to Guam, but and then also those in San Diego. So. I had that job.
So when you say you'd go there, you'd fly there, or?
I mean, we'd go on a commercial aircraft, okay. And then we'd assess to make their programs were good, and then we'd give them their check rides.
Oh, you were one of them guys that walked in and said, "You're not doing this right, or you're doing that right." Or...
No, I mean, for the most part, everyone knew what they were doing. It wasn't never failed a squadron or anything like that. So. But I was also a flight instructor too, so that would kind of be my job. I don't want to say it was my primary ground job, but I was also, when I would come back, I would still instruct students in San Diego. So, and then my ending job at that tour, I was a standardization officer. So I would basically make sure the squadron full of instructors, operated at a certain level. Everyone knew what the rules were, so I'm basically, I would be to shorten it, I would be the STAN officer. So it was a good job to end up on. It was regarded highly, so that was good.
Mm-hmm.
And then so those are my first 2 tours, and from there it kind of opens up. You don't have to fly anymore, or you can choose not to. So you can go do what's called a disassociated sea tour. So I chose to go do something other than flying. which is fine. It's good. It develops you. You get to see a different side of the Navy. So I chose to go on an amphibious assault ship, the USS Macon Island.
Which one?
USS Macon Island, LHD 8. It was in San Diego, so I didn't have to move. That was good. So I'm no longer working on North Island in San Diego. I'm working down with where all the ships are, which is called 32nd Street base. There's a lot more people there, a lot more traffic, but it's something new. Like I said, it's a disassociated tour. I worked in the Air Department. I was one of the division officers for the Air Department. I came in at a time when the ship was getting ready to go into maintenance. But before that, we got to do San Francisco Fleet Week. So I just got there. We got to go to San Francisco. It was a pretty good time. And I weaseled my way again out of standing duty. So didn't have to do that. I checked in onto duty after we went to Fleet Week. So ship got back to San Diego, and we're now in maintenance phase. Ship's getting worked on, so I figure out what that's about. Whole bunch of equipment is brought on the ship. We wear hard hats every day. We're still working every day. We're maintaining. And I'm making sure, as one of the division officers, I have a lot more responsibility. I think I had at that point probably about probably 40 or 50 people, E1s to I guess E7s under my charge. So, which was interesting because I'm the new division officer. I don't know much about the ship. I haven't been an officer for that long. I'm still a lieutenant. I'm still an E3. They're the experts on how to maintain their spaces. So we're maintaining the air department spaces, the flight deck, the hangar bay, and everything associated with that. So it was a neat experience, learning how to lead on a ship, being part of ship's company. Something different than I had done before, so it was pretty cool. Went through maintenance phase. We deployed. I think we left June or July, and I was deployed. And that was toward the end of my time there. I went through a whole set of workups, and left deployment midway because it was my time to leave. And trained someone else before I left, and I was there for about 2.5 years. I'm trying to remember exactly what year I left. I think it was, so that tour was 2012, 2014, just over a couple years. On the day I left for deployment, I remember, so I got selected for department head. I put on, during that tour, I put on 04, I put on lieutenant commander. And found out I was going to a squadron.
04 is a what?
Lieutenant commander.
Lieutenant commander,
Lieutenant
okay.
commander. So I found out I was going to HSC 15, which was I was going to go fly helicopters again, which was, something at that.
Were you missing it?
I was missing it, but that was kind of the normal progression. You do your first couple tours, then you do a tour, something different, and then you go back. Now you have your own department, or in a squadron. So you're not the CO or the XO. You're, I guess, like I said, one of the department heads. So came back. I had to learn how to fly again. I didn't really not know how to, but you have to go through the refresher training
again.
I went through the refresher training and then reported as safety officer at HC 15, or the safety department head. It's not a big department, but I was there for a year, and that squadron was part of an air wing that got their funding cut, a bunch of budgetary stuff, so I had to go find a new job. So I went to another squadron, another helicopter squadron in San Diego. There was an opening, and then So yeah, that first squadron, HSC 15, was on the USS Carl Vinson. I didn't deploy with her. Like I said, I was only there for a year. So to finish out my department head tour, I was now at HSC 21. It was a little different because it was an expeditionary squadron. It was not on aircraft carriers. It was, they could kind of go out on detachments. The whole squadron wouldn't pick up and move and go to a carrier and deploy. Only 2 or 3 aircraft would at a time. And the squadron could, they always had people that were at I guess, home guard and were training the next detachment to go out. So the squadron would probably have about 1 detachment in workups, 1 detachment deployed. On average, it was probably about that. So, so I finished out my 2 years there. I was the operations officer, and then actually towards the last part of my time as a department head, the executive officer at the time got picked to go to deploy, which was not normal. So he deployed. So the squadron needed an XO. They needed an executive officer. So I was the, I guess, the acting executive officer for about 6-7 months. So that was not normal. As a lieutenant commander, to be sitting in that seat.
Was it challenging?
It was. It was a squadron of about 350 people. So, like I said, it was my department head tour. I didn't know everybody. Whether that was, by face, sure, but by name, absolutely not. The officers, sure, I knew them. But whether it was the maintainers that worked out on the aircraft.
But that's what you were in charge of, was the officers, right? They have
Sure.
them do their job?
Sure. Yeah. I interacted with them more, whether it was in the aircraft or just through my daily duties. But now I'm, acting in a capacity as second in charge of a...
Are you acting? Do you get to pay with it too? Or?
No.
So you're acting?
Just acting only. So that was an amazing learning experience, having to work directly for the commanding officer, and then also on the enlisted side, the command master chief, so the E9, who was in charge of all the enlisted personnel. So definitely, she imparted a lot of leadership and mentoring on me. It was pretty neat being part of a command triad. So, being a triad was the commanding officer, the executive officer, and the command master chief. So, even though I was acting only, it was pretty neat. It's pretty cool. Great learning experience.
Quite an experience, yeah.
Yeah. So that was my department head tour. Again, I was in San Diego. I was about 3 years long. Now I have to go decide. That was a sea tour. I didn't deploy, just kind of my timing. I didn't get to deploy, so that was, I guess, fortunate and unfortunate at the time. Fortunate.
Would you like to have deployed?
I guess, yeah, I would have gotten some experience deploying, but being in an expeditionary squadron, an 04 lieutenant commander gets to take their own detachment and deploy. The CO and XO historically do not. So yeah, I was not able to take my own detachment out and deploy. So, but I guess the good news is I was able to, I guess, go home every night. There was that. So at that time, so this tour took me through 2015 to 2017. By that time, I was married. I had first kid was born in 2013, so it was nice being able to, to not have to deploy. So
Life was good.
life was good. After that, it's as anything in the military, it's competitive. Kind of had to figure out what I want to do next. So the job opportunities kind of open up even more. Some people are able to fly after their department head tour, but there's also other staffs you can go to, and some things definitely not involving flying. So I chose, I had a good enough record. I could go to, I worked at the Pentagon after that.
To the Pentagon?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I was there from 2018 to early 2020. So just under 2 years. I worked at the Navy Comptroller office. So I learned how to be a budget analyst for the Navy. I learned how we budget for money, how we spend money. Kind of learning how to be, make sure that the Navy is fiscally responsible. I got to work with an amazing group of civilians who have been doing that job for, in some instances, decades. So, great group of professionals.
A lot of experience.
A lot of experience. And it was pretty cool working at the Pentagon. So, the novelty wore off pretty quick. It was just a big office building. So, but I lived in Falls Church, Virginia. It was about a 20-minute drive to the Pentagon. I had my own cubicle. It was
Windows?
Pretty cool. What's that?
You have windows?
Yes, I had a window. We looked onto, or we could look towards another part of the Pentagon, so we could sort of see the sky. But yeah, it was good. It was a very steep learning curve. I do not have a financial management degree, so.
I suppose you went and saw the memorial, the 9/11 memorial?
We did, at the Pentagon.
Pretty impressive, yeah.
It was, and actually, so my first week there was, aside from learning how to get to your office, which it was interesting the first time trying to figure out how to get back to my office. After a couple of days, it's easy. So yeah, I worked at the financial management and budget office. It's broken up into branches, and then in the end there are divisions, and then there's a 2-star admiral that's in charge. But one of he was a civilian. He finished out his career as an executive officer of a submarine, and then he kind of went into from being active duty to kind of learning how the Navy managed money. He was the deputy of what we call FMB1, so kind of the operations side of the Navy. And you're asking about the memorial there. So he had worked at the Pentagon he was one of those that had worked for decades. He told me a story about his time, or his day at 9/11. He was there. He was in part of the Pentagon that was close to where the impact was. So he had to figure out how to get out of the Pentagon, out of a burning building. So he kind of went through his day. I guess went through his time during that day, and then how he got. After that happened, transportation system shut down. Everything, trains, planes, automobiles. But he was able to get out of town early enough before everything got shut down. So it was pretty neat, him listening to him describe that story during that day. So pretty cool. Let's see. It was kind of a clock in, clock out job. There was no duty. I didn't have to work on the weekends. I probably did one work travel trip my entire time there. Like I said, it was two years. I now had 2 kids, so pretty good family time. That was good.
A lot to do in Washington.
There is. Kids were pretty young, but still, we had a great time. Had a lot of friends there that I had, either just met or they were the same, I guess, phase of training as I was. They had just finished their department head tours, so we knew a lot of friends there that had families, and so we had a pretty good time. My first year there, I found out I got selected for 05, so commander. So during my time there, I put on 05. And it was a pretty cool experience. I I was able to, since I was in DC, able to ask, he was still my representative at the time, Colin Peterson. I asked his staff to be like, hey, I'm now in DC, I got selected for 05, could he promote me? Which they could, as a sitting member of Congress. So eventually they said yes. He was able to promote me. I forget when exactly it happened, but
He was well respected. Yep.
yeah. Yeah, chose to do it in, he was the chair of the Agricultural Committee at the time, so we were able to use the Agricultural Committee's, I guess, workspace, official workspace, to do it. So my parents flew in, and there's a lot of people from, I guess, my office, they were there too. And then I talked about some of the friends that I had there. They were able to make it also. So I was in my summer whites. It was pretty cool. It was, again, I forget what time of year it was. I should probably remember something like that. My kids were there too, and my family, they were there. I got to go meet him, Colin Peterson. It was just a one-on-one conversation before he did the promotion. We probably talked for about 15 minutes. It was pretty cool. And then we came out. He did the ceremony, and yeah, then I was a commander, so it was pretty neat. At that time, I probably about 6 months, 8 months ahead of that, I found out I got picked for Aviation Squadron Command. So, which is great. That's now I'm in 05, and after I'm done with this tour, I would be able to, go command a squadron, which is pretty cool.
There's no flying, you're in command of the squadron.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Okay.
So, again, you get to put in your preferences of, what kind of squadron you want to be in command of. So you could either go expeditionary, which is just what I finished at my department head tour, or you could go back and be in command of a squadron on an aircraft carrier. So eventually I got picked to be HSC-4, which is a squadron in San Diego, California, which at the time and is still attached to the USS Carl Vinson. So it's an aircraft carrier. It was great. We're going back to San Diego. We owned a house there, or we still do, which is basically what we wanted. So it was good. Finished up my tour at the Pentagon. It had been over a year since I had flown in a helicopter, so I had to go through refresher training again. So it was nice. I had a job, but I was a student again for about 6, 7, 8 months. And I was getting paid a lot more this time to be a student, so it was good. Then I checked in December 1st, 2020 as the XO, as executive officer of HSC-4. And it was off to the races at that point. Learning how to be an XO.
You've already had some experience though.
Sure, but now officially acting in that capacity.
And getting paid.
Getting paid. It was good. So like I said, December I reported there. We were set to deploy in July. So we had 3 sets of workups that we had to go do. They're about anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks each. So yeah, a lot of time away from family, a lot of flight time, a lot of learning, and kind of how to integrate back into the aircraft carrier, into the carrier air wing. It was, we ended up deploying a month early because we had to go say hi to the Russians off the coast of Hawaii. They planned and were doing, like I said, a summer exercise off the coast of Hawaii. So the Navy decided, hey, if you're going to be there, we're going to be there. We, as in the U.S. Navy. So they sent the Carl Vinson, the strike group, and the air wing. So we did training during that time, but we were making
Training, watching them.
Right, correct. We were training, we were watching them. So now I'm in a it's still kind of like a Navy Blackhawk. It's the 60 Sierra. It's the Nighthawk. The tail wheel's a little bit farther back, but we still did a bunch of the same missions. So
You weren't buzzed by the Russians, were you? Like we saw sometimes on the news where the Russians were buzzing ships.
not the aircraft carrier, not ours. Yes, but we were there to again support the air wing and search and rescue. Also personnel recovery if someone were to eject. We would do vertical replenishment, so vert rep. Logistics, we would,
Did you ever pick anybody up that ejected?
I have not. No, I've never been part of a rescue. So
Okay. Trained for it, but didn't have to do it.
a lot of training. So that cruise was from June of 2020, and then we got back in February of 2021. So it's about eight and a half months. It was a long time. But we did some. It was the most rewarding cruise of my tour. As I was
I'm gonna have to stop that for a second.
Yeah. Okay. Part two. Still on deployment on the Carl Vinson. I did mention it was my most rewarding deployment experience, being second in charge of a squadron. We got to do some pretty cool things. We rescued some people. If you remember, gosh, it was January of 2021. I'm sure it was in the news. One of the new fighters on board crashed into the back end of a ship, so it was an F-35.
Yeah.
Yep. It was my squadron that picked that pilot up.
It's one of the new jets, wasn't it?
Yeah. It made the news. So yeah, there was some other people that were injured during that crash, and then HSC-4, so my squadron, we brought some people from the Carl Vinson to the Philippines. So
Hospital in Philippines.
yeah, overall that was probably about it was probably like a 500-mile mission. I did not fly it. I was on alert, so like I said, 500 miles round trip. But about just because of COVID at the time, and getting clearances into and out of the Philippines, that crew was probably about a 12-hour day. So if you can imagine flying back at night, they probably landed around 1:30 in the morning. There's no moon. It's pretty blackout, so the darkest night that you can imagine. Getting back to the aircraft carrier after a 12-hour day. So,
So you mentioned COVID. Was that an issue on the ship?
I mean, we lived with it. We didn't wear masks when we were deployed. I'm sure as we on that deployment, we had a couple port calls. We were in Japan, in Yokosuka. We only got to stay on the base. And then we did also have 2 port calls in Guam. So not the traditional port calls, but I'm pretty sure each time we went into Guam, we probably picked up another variant of COVID.
So did you have it on the ship? People did get COVID?
Oh yeah.
Was it pretty bad? Or?
No, it didn't. I mean, people did get sort of sick. I'm pretty sure I had, all the strains of COVID just because it went throughout the ship. But at that point, we had vaccines and everything, so it would be a mild case, and we'd continue.
Sure.
We were deployed, so we had to continue doing our job, and we did. So yeah, we got back in February 21. Pretty busy time, and then I took over command in March 24th of 2021. So
you're a bigwig now.
I am. Let's see, March. I've been Yeah, the CO for 5 months, and it's a lot more fun being a CO than an XO. So it's still busy, but it's your squadron. I don't want to say you can run things how you see fit, but you can. But you're in charge. Whether that is making sure the aircraft are maintained, you are as you go through the inspections, getting ready for next deployment. Everything goes smoothly. It's very rewarding. I wouldn't change anything as far as what I've done so far. And I've got 18 years in, so I guess it's probably been flying helicopters for this long. It's kind of the pinnacle of being able to command a squadron. It was great.
You've had quite a rewarding career.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I got about just under a year left as CO, and then that'll put me at about 19 years. And I will do at least one more tour. We'll see. That'll put me at about 22. So we'll see what happens after that.
Put you in 22 years in?
22 years in.
And then you get to make a decision then whether to stay or
yes, yeah.
Move on.
Yeah, and then find out what I'm going to do next. So, which I don't know yet, and that's okay.
I guess I don't have to ask you if you've changed anything because you said you wouldn't.
No, I've gotten pretty lucky. Over the course of this interview, I've said I've been able to put in preferences of where I want to go during my tours. For the most part, I've gotten my first choice.
You've been really lucky.
I've been lucky. Sure, there's probably an amount of luck, an amount of timing that goes into that, and also just kind of, the other part is, I guess how well I've performed in my career, so that that's kind of taken into account too. So I think I've done a decent job. As I've promoted from 01 to 05, so we'll see where it takes me from here.
Okay. Anything else you want to add, Ben?
No, I think I'm good.
Well, I want to thank you for your service and continued service, and thank you for doing this interview.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Ben.